You're watching the YouTube channel called History. There are many people who wrote history from their perspective or from their environment, and most of the books written on history is based on the European culture or European environment. And there are 7 continents, as we all know, which have to be equally taken into consideration. And there are very limited historians who have written about the world history. And the history of the South is not known to the world. Basically, starting from the people who have written, whether it is Herodotus or the modern writers like different historical writers, especially from Max Muller, and the history has been made or written by the dominant or the rulers, and the rulers who were ruling the world wrote history according to their environment, to their culture, and to their possibilities, to make themselves as known to everyone. Like, as we all know, the universal saying, like, the sun never is set in England. So that's a way that history is written. And what people have to learn is, like, people have to know is the real perspective of writing history. How the history has to be written. Why isn't the history written in a proper manner? We will look at all these things from all the aspects of researches, from archaeological evidences, geographical evidences, scientific evidences, and even literary evidences we will look into and see judicially how it is possible to prove that history has to be written in a right aspect. And we will watch all these things from different angles. Usually, when the historians write the history, right, they focus on some of the evidences that is available for them, whether it is archaeological evidence or literary evidence. European history, is written with their own document, their own environment, their own history based on Greek or Roman base. But this cannot be attributed to writing the world history. It is quite wide. When you think about China, when you think about southernmost part of India, when you think about Africa, it's quite wide open, and we will have to look at it from the right angle. And let's look at it. And when you look at writing of history, of course, there are great writers who have mentioned their evidences and proof in an authenticated manner. And in 1920, if you look at the history when the British people were ruling in India, and they were trying to make a railway linking Pakistan and India, that particular region would become a link. During the excavation, they found out there were many archaeological evidences from that particular region, and which has been made as the Indus Valley civilization, and identified by Father Eras. So when we look into this particular topic, the history that was written by the Europeans has to be rethought. It was not taken into the way that it was written. And when UNESCO took up this challenge of writing the African history, there were lots of things proposed on whether to follow the European methodology or to follow their own cultural way of writing the history, in which oral tradition was taken into consideration. But when you look at this writing of history, we can really take into the point of the southernmost approach of the world. Possibly when we look at this world as one continent, India, Africa, or Australia, they were all put together as one continent, where the human evolution was possibly spread gradually into different parts of the world. And when you take these Western gods into consideration, it has got the most ancient, the living beings found on this earth, and the climatic change, the climatic atmosphere that proves that this particular region has more ambience for the emerging of human beings, the emerging of living organisms in this world. And these things have to be taken into the real consideration when we write history. And specifically when you look at Tamil literature, we call, many of the people have drafted as Dravidian history, which is not basically true. It is a Tamil history when you look at from the southernmost part of India. And the literature of the Tamil goes back to possibly 7,000 years. the archaeological evidences that are found in Kiladi or Adichanallur in southernmost part of India that prove that people had lived in this particular region some 10,000 years ago. Possibly this Kiladi region has proved that people have lived 3,200 years ago in this region with the culture, with the modern facilities that they had in their particular region. And therefore the history has to be taught from different angles. It has to be dismantled from the way that has been looked at so far. And therefore we have many more things to talk about. That is especially when you think about Marcel Victor, one of the greatest linguists who have been possibly known to the world with 150 books of research, who started very similar with Noam Chomsky or Stephen Hancock, who has been focused as the archaeological research scholar who is staying in America and producing number of evidences and authentication to prove that the South Indian region has the base for the most ancient historical evidence. That has been taken into consideration when we study. And the Tamil literature possibly has its own depth. And we follow, if you look at the world grammatical structure of any language, it is Tamil that has been followed with the same grammatical functioning or the great grammatical structure that has been brought for about 2,000 years or 3,000 years of history. Starting from Paribadal or Tolkappiyam, which produces and gives the basic for grammatical structure with nature, and that has been followed so far in this year. This is the very evident that proves that the human beings on this earth was specifically highly civilized in 3,000 years ago. And this is what has made the people think that the history has to be rewritten from the aspect of the southern point of view or from the eastern point of view. And we will be looking into different aspects for the following videos that we can look at how history has to be written from unbiased manner, or in an unbiased manner, how people could look at it from the original concept of writing history. So the following days we will follow, and we really come up with a number of evidences, and we use the intellectual approach to find out which ways to write history to make people know what is the real history of the earth. From the humanistic point of view, or from the environmental point of view, or any academic point of view, it has to be studied. Let's go on catching all these things in the following videos. Have a great day.